The Admiral's hands trembled, not from fear. No, fear had come and gone. What remained now was something colder, emptier, a hollow silence that even the hum of the command deck couldn't fill. His once pristine silver uniform was stained dark with soot and dried blood. Not his own. His crew. His warriors. The millions he led. Gone. Admiral Vrathek, once feared across 5 galaxies, stood before a cracked view screen that no longer showed the stars, but a graveyard. Ships drifted, split open like fruit. Fires still burned on what was left of the flagships. He watched, blinking slowly, as a single small vessel, ugly, crude, unmistakably human, floated untouched through the wreckage. "Pull up the last combat feed," he rasped. The deck officer, one of the few left alive, hesitated. His scales had gone pale. "Sir, you don't want to see it again." "I need to." With a reluctant motion, the officer tapped a command, and the screen flickered to life. It started like they'd expected. The humans had arrived in their laughable fleet, barely 1,000 ships. Most were small. None looked impressive. The Gorinthi Armada, Vrathek's pride and terror, numbered over 100,000, sleek, engineered, battle-proven. They didn't fire first, the humans did. Their weapons weren't stronger, their shields weren't better. But the chaos they caused, they moved like they knew something the Ginthi didn't. They hit targets no one ever thought to defend: communications nodes, life support hubs, the AI sync relays. Their ship split apart only to reform. One flew straight into a reactor core on purpose, taking 7 cruisers with it. No protocol, no formation, just pure madness. "Pause," Burke said. The image froze on the face of a human commander, blood running down his forehead. He was grinning, while his ship burned. What kind of species smiles while dying? No one answered. Behind him, the bodies of his command crew lay slumped in their chairs, silent, gone. Some had been with him since the War of Frozen Moons. Veterans, legends. He hadn't even gotten to say goodbye. "They should have lost," Vrath whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "We had numbers. We had technology. We had everything." The officer behind him swallowed. "We underestimated them, sir." The Admiral turned slowly. Underestimated? The word tasted wrong. Pathetic. This wasn't a mistake. This was annihilation. The humans didn't just win. They dismantled them, mind, body, and soul. And now they were sending a message. The console pinged with a new incoming transmission. It came from the human vessel still drifting outside. No encryption. Open channel. Arrogant bastards. "Put it through," Brack said. The screen flickered again, showing a woman, mid-40s, greying hair, human military gear torn and burned. Her eyes were cold. "This is Commander Elena Hayes of Earth's 7th Resistance Fleet," she said. "To what remains of the Ginthi Armada. This is mercy." Vrath didn't speak. Couldn't. "We warned you," she continued. "We told you not to enslave our colonies, not to experiment on our civilians, not to burn our cities." She leaned forward. "You didn't listen." The feed cut out. Vrath stood in the silence, shaking harder now, not from rage, not even from defeat, but because deep in his bones he realized something the Ginthi had never considered before. Humanity wasn't just fighting to win. They were fighting like they had nothing to lose. And somehow that made them invincible. The ruins of the command deck echoed with the groan of twisted metal. Life support systems flickered in and out, and the artificial gravity was beginning to fail. Still, Admiral Vrata didn't move. He stood locked in place, staring at the darkened screen where Commander Elena Hayes had just spoken. Her voice still rang in his ears, not because it was loud, but because it was calm. Cold, certain. They had just destroyed a fleet that could have swallowed stars, and they spoke like they hadn't even broken a sweat. The officer behind him stumbled, coughing from the smoke curling in through the vents. "Admiral, we have to abandon ship." "To where?" Grathek muttered. "There's nothing left. Some escape pods are still functional. One of the cruisers is limping nearby. We might make it." He didn't answer right away. He was remembering the simulations, the war games, the thousands of scenarios run by their finest tacticians and artificial minds. Every single one of them had predicted a quick, effortless victory. They had mocked the humans' outdated tech, their fractured systems, their reliance on chaos over structure. They never accounted for what it felt like to face them. He finally moved, shoulders heavy, and followed the officer down the corridor. Debris littered the floor, shards of armour plating, pieces of people, weapons dropped mid-battle. They passed a cracked viewport. Outside, the human vessel was still drifting, circling them like a predator not yet done with its prey. It made no sense. "Why didn't they finish us?" Grass said aloud. The officer hesitated. "You heard her. She said this was mercy." "No," the Admiral snapped. "That wasn't mercy. That was a warning. She wants us to tell the others. She wants this story to spread." They reached the hangar bay. It was chaos, officers screaming, medics dragging wounded across the deck, escape pods filling quickly. There weren't enough for everyone. There never were. Grass looked at his crew, the proud Gorinthi, now broken and terrified. Some wouldn't even look him in the eye. He didn't blame them. As he stepped toward the last pod, a sharp voice crackled through the intercom. "Admiral Vratha," it said. "Human. Again. Same woman." She was broadcasting to the whole ship. "Now, before you flee like the coward you are, I want to tell you a story." He froze. "She was 17, Hayes continued. "Her name was Talia. She was my niece. She lived on Ballora 9 when your ships came." The hangar fell quiet. "She wasn't a soldier, just a student. You took her, along with hundreds of others. Your scientists tore into them, treated them like lab animals." Grathek's jaw tightened. "She survived long enough to send a message. One line. They're taking us apart piece by piece. That's all we had left of her." The Admiral knew of the facility on Ballora 9, one of many he had approved, the Harvest Protocols himself. "You could have fought clean," Hayes said, "but you made it personal. So did we." The message cut out again. No orders followed, no demands, just silence. Breathe climbed into the pod, and the door hissed shut behind him. As the launch sequence began, he looked back at the flaming remains of the Ginthi flagship, once the mightiest vessel in the fleet, now just another burned carcass in space. The pod shot away, leaving the wreckage behind, but the shame stayed. It was stitched into every breath he took. They had underestimated the humans, not because of numbers, not because of weapons, but because they forgot one simple truth. When you hurt something fragile long enough, it learns to bite back. And when humanity bit back, it didn't stop at the hand. It took the whole damn arm. The escape pod drifted through the black silent void like a casket. Inside, Admiral Vrathek sat hunched over, arms wrapped around his knees, staring blankly at the floor. The pod's AI flickered to life every so often to announce status updates, but he barely heard them. His mind was trapped, looping back to the screams, the fire, the look in the human commander's eyes as she smiled through the flames. He had led over 100,000 ships, and not just lost, but been humiliated. The pod jolted as it latched onto a crippled Ginthi cruiser, one of the few survivors. When the door hissed open, he was met by a pair of medics who didn't salute, didn't speak. They just looked at him like he was one of the wounded. Maybe he was. The corridors of the cruiser were dim. Flickering makeshift triage zones lined the walls, and everywhere he walked, he passed rows of soldiers, missing limbs, eyes, hope. There were no victory songs, no angry vows of revenge, just whispers. Fragments of disbelief, They shouldn't have beaten us. How did we not see it coming? Are they even human? He tried to ignore it. He made his way to what was left of the command centre, where only 2 officers remained functional. They stood when he entered, not out of respect, but fear. One of them, a younger tactician named Kelzar, cleared his throat. "Admiral, High Command is demanding a report." "Tell them it was a tactical anomaly," Frathek muttered. "Tell them the humans employed suicidal tactics and exploited unexpected weaknesses." Kelzar blinked. "Sir, with respect, no one's going to believe that." Frath looked up sharply. "Are you questioning my word?" "I'm questioning reality," Kelzar snapped back, surprising even himself. "They flew ships half our size. Their fleet was outnumbered 100 to 1. And we didn't lose a battle, Admiral. We lost a war in a single night." Frath said nothing. He couldn't argue with it. Kelzar continued, voice trembling now. "They knew us, sir. They knew how we think, how we fight. They disabled our command relays before we even launched missiles. They jammed our targeting systems using their own destroyed ships. They used their own dead as cover." "They're not soldiers," the second officer whispered. "They're monsters." "No," Frathek said slowly. "There's something worse. They're desperate. And that's what makes them so dangerous." The room fell silent again. Then the cruiser's comm system lit up with an alert. "Incoming broadcast, unsecured channel, human frequency again." The crew froze. "Play it," the Admiral said grimly. Elena Hayes appeared once more. The background behind her was different this time. Less war-torn, cleaner. A control room, perhaps. She looked calm, like someone who had already accepted the next step. "This message is for all surviving Gorinthi forces," she said. "We know you're retreating. We know you're bleeding. And we know your leaders won't admit it. But you lost." She leaned forward. "You're not the first empire to try and crush us. But let me ask you something. How many of them still exist?" No one answered. "Humanity is not special because we're strong," she said. "We're special because we adapt. Every time we're broken, we come back sharper, meaner, hungrier." Then her voice darkened. "And now you've made us very, very hungry." The screen blinked off. Frack stood slowly. "She's right." The officers looked at him. "She's not sending these messages for us. She's not trying to win a war. She's trying to rewrite what fear means. This is psychological warfare, and it's working." Kelzar swallowed. "What do we do?" The Admiral didn't answer, because for the first time in his long, decorated military life, he didn't know. He had trained to defeat armies, not ghosts. And right now, humanity wasn't just fighting back, they were haunting them. The silence in the command chamber stretched for long, agonizing minutes after the broadcast ended. No one dared speak. The image of Eleanor Hayes, her cold certainty, her deliberate choice of words. It lingered like a toxin in the air. Admiral Vrata felt a pulse behind his eyes, a pressure he hadn't known since his youth, the sensation of fear, not for his life, for his legacy. He had thought this war was about territory, resources, domination. But it wasn't. It had never been that simple. This was about revenge. The humans weren't just trying to survive. They wanted the Ginthia Empire to feel every ounce of suffering they'd endured. And judging by the burned-out fleets and shattered colonies, they were succeeding. "Status on the nearest relay gate?" Frathsea finally asked. Kelzar tapped at his console with shaking fingers. "Gate 419 is functional but under sporadic assault. We lost contact with Gate 423 hours ago. Scans show no wreckage. Just nothing." "Nothing," the Admiral repeated. "No debris, no signal. Like it was never there." That made the hair-like tendrils on the back of Roth's neck twitch. The humans were learning fast. The Ginthia Empire had prided itself on control, on the art of surveillance, on total visibility. But these humans, They thrived in the dark. They attacked from angles that shouldn't have existed, used tactics no sane species would try. And worst of all, they didn't care if they died doing it. They cared more about the message. "Sir," Kelzar said quietly, "should we request reinforcements?" Vrathzi stared at the dimly lit screen ahead of him. What was the point of reinforcements when morale was already shattered? When soldiers began questioning the very cause they were fighting for? He'd seen it in their eyes. The fear wasn't just of humans anymore, it was the fear of a shift, of the end of Gorinthi supremacy. "No," he said at last. "We won't request reinforcements." Kelzar blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "We'll return to the capital, deliver our report, face the High Command. Hey everyone, I'm on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to make it happen. If you're enjoying the story and haven't subscribed yet, please join our community by hitting that subscribe button. Your support means the world to me." If they still want to throw more fleets at Earth, they can do it knowing the truth. And what truth is that? That they're not dealing with savages, Vrathith said. They're dealing with students of war, fast learners, creatures willing to burn themselves just to scar us. He turned to leave the bridge, but paused at the doorway. "Begin repairs. Get us moving." As he walked through the corridor, the weight of leadership dragged behind him like chains. He passed a group of soldiers being treated for burns and plasma lacerations. One of them locked eyes with him. The soldier's face was half melted, but his expression was clear. "You did this to us." The shame nearly dropped him to his knees. Hours later, in the Admiral's private quarters, he replayed old war footage. Not from this battle, but from humanity's past. Primitive wars, tribal conflicts, civil wars, then global ones, each more violent than the last. And each time, humanity came back stronger, smarter, more ruthless. Their species had fought itself for centuries before ever turning their eyes to the stars. The Ginthia had always viewed that as weakness, infighting, chaos. But now Vrathek saw it differently. It was refinement. They weren't a fractured species, they were hardened. He stared at an old Earth transmission, a human leader screaming at his people to fight to the last breath, bombs falling in the distance. And still, they fought. There was something terrifyingly pure about that kind of spirit. It didn't just resist domination, it consumed it. A ping interrupted his thoughts, a private encoded transmission from an unknown source. Frowning, he accepted the call. The screen lit up, not with a face, but a black screen and a single voice. "Admiral Vrathek," it said, male, human, calm. He stiffened. "How did you get this frequency?" "We don't need to tell you that," the voice said. "You know how we work by now." Vrath didn't respond. He just listened. "We're not sending this to gloat, not to threaten, just to make you understand." The voice paused. "You were never fighting soldiers. You were fighting orphans, widows, slaves, survivors. You turned our people into monsters, and now you're watching what monsters do when they have nothing left to lose." The screen went dark. No threat, no demand. Just the sound of truth, and a silence that cut deeper than any blade. Roth sat back in his chair, clawed hands rubbing at his tired eyes. He had once believed his name would be etched into history as the conqueror of Earth. But now he wasn't sure it would be remembered at all, beneath the scorched skies of what was once the thriving Gorinthi colony of Veltron III. Ash floated like snow. The land had been turned inside out, smoke rising from shattered towers, craters stretching for miles, and silence where once there had been the hum of industry and arrogance. In the heart of the wreckage, a human outpost had been established. It wasn't much, just a few prefab bunkers and a sea of makeshift tents. But it stood where a city had fallen. That in itself was the message. Commander Eleanor Hayes stood on a ridge overlooking the ruins. Her armor was scarred, her left shoulder bandaged, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't faded in weeks. But she stood tall, not because she felt powerful, but because she had to. Behind her, the wind howled through the skeleton of a Gorinthi palace, the last monument of their control here. It had taken them years to build it. The humans had turned it to rubble in hours. "You sure about broadcasting again?" a voice said from behind her. She turned. Lieutenant Milo Sandon, her comms officer, stood there with a cracked datapad under one arm. He was young, face still fresh with that edge of defiance that hadn't yet calcified into trauma. "They're listening," she replied simply. Milo frowned. "They're afraid. You can see it in their signals. Tight bursts, encrypted to hell, no coordination. They're panicking." "Good." She stepped into the command tent and keyed up the broadcast unit herself. This message wouldn't come from some polished studio or echo from a shiny command ship. Number it would come from the dirt, from the ashes, from the reality of war. The camera flickered to life, casting her face onto the feed. No helmet, no rank insignia, just a human, bloodied and breathing. "To the Ginthi High Command," she began, voice steady. "You sent fleets, armadas. You sent monsters in metal shells to break us." She paused. "We broke first. That's true. You tore through our worlds, enslaved our people, and laughed while you did it. But here's something you never understood." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping like the quiet before a storm. "When you break a human, we don't stay broken. We come back sharper." The feed ended without warning, just like the others. Let them sit with it. Let them choke on it. Back outside, Hayes walked through the camp. Around her, the so-called resistance was a patchwork of ex-miners, ex-farmers, escaped prisoners, rogue engineers. Some carried rifles welded from junk. Others wore bits of stolen Garianthi armour over civilian clothes. And yet, here they stood, holding a conquered alien planet. She stopped near the medic tent, where a group of kids were helping clean bandages. One of them, no older than 10, was stitching up a soldier's arm with hands steadier than most grown men. "Where'd you learn that?" Hayes asked. The boy looked up at her with blank eyes. "I watched them do it on my sister before they cut her open." Hayes froze. The soldier said nothing, just nodded at the boy and let him finish. This was the war now. No rules, no uniforms, just scars wearing human faces. Later that night, in the centre of the camp, a fire was lit. Not for warmth, just something to stare at that didn't. Scream back. A former schoolteacher turned marksman Ava Lennox passed around food rations. She sat beside Hayes and sighed heavily. "Think they'll retaliate for Veltran 3? Ava asked. "They have to," Hayes replied. "If they don't, their empire crumbles from fear. But if they do, they play right into our hands." "Sounds like you want them to hit us again." Hayes took a long breath. "I want them to overextend. I want them angry. I want them reckless." Ava looked at her. "And what do you want, Elena, when this is over?" Ha didn't answer for a long time. Her eyes stayed fixed on the flames. "When I was 17, she said finally, I wanted to be a poet. Maybe open a bookstore, live near a lake, read old Earth books no one remembers." Ava blinked. "And now? Now I want their empire to rot in its own silence." She stood and walked away, her boots crunching through blackened dirt. Somewhere out there, Admiral Vrathic was alive. That wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. Let the legend live with the shame. Let the mighty become the witnesses. Hayes looked up at the stars. She didn't know if Earth would ever be whole again. But she did know one thing. The Ginthi had awakened something they didn't understand. And now it was wide awake. The Ginthi capital, Thazul Prime, was a world of cold precision and towering arrogance. Giant obsidian structures pierced the clouds like weapons aimed at the heavens. and the sky itself was forever darkened by layers of industrial smoke, as if sunlight was unworthy of reaching their empire's heart. It was a planet designed to project power, control, fear. But lately something had changed. The people walked with unease, eyes flicked sideways in hushed paranoia. Every soldier's hand hovered a little too close to their weapon. And in the inner chamber of the High Command, the most powerful Garinthi mind sat in tense silence. Admiral Vratha stood before them alone, stripped of his formal armour, his face gaunt from weeks of shame and nightmares. "You lost 100,000 ships," a cold voice rang from the high table, "to savages." "They are not savages," Vrath said, his voice steady though his hands curled into trembling fists. "They are something new." Murmurs passed through the council like static. Chancellor Vok, the highest among them, stood slowly. His gold-plated mantle caught the flickering blue light of the war table. "So, you're saying we are outdated?" "I'm saying we misunderstood the enemy," Vrata answered. "We built our military around control, discipline, numbers. They built theirs around chaos, instinct, and vengeance. We train warriors. They create monsters." "And what of Tron 3, another councillor barked. "A colony fortified for planetary siege, toppled by what? Farmers with rifles?" Vrata nodded slowly. "Yes, that's exactly what happened." The room fell quiet. Disbelief turned to something uglier, fear disguised as anger. "They're not targeting our military anymore," he continued. "They're targeting our symbols, our legacies. They're destroying the idea of our invincibility. And worse, they're making us doubt ourselves." Another councillor stood. "Then we strike back harder. We launch a cleansing operation, burn their remaining colonies to dust." Vratha looked him dead in the eyes. "We already tried that." Silence. "I watched human ships ram into our flagships without firing a single shot. I watched them jam our AI networks with ancient Earth frequencies, music even. One entire battle group went offline because of a human lullaby broadcasted on repeat. We have technology, they have improvisation, and they're using it like a scalpel." Vok's voice was like ice. "Are you suggesting we negotiate?" "No," Vrath said with quiet rage. "I'm suggesting we learn. Because if we don't adapt, we're next." The council did not agree, not openly, not yet, but the cracks were forming. That same night, in the city's underlayers, a small flickering screen came to life in a smuggler's den. A transmission, unauthorized, human. Elena Hayes again. No dramatic backdrop this time, just her eyes, bloodshot and burning. "Garinthi citizens," she said, "we know you're listening, and we know your leaders are lying to you." She held up a data chip between two fingers. "This contains logs from your own dead, the screams of soldiers, the last words of commanders who begged for mercy before our ships descended." She paused. "We're not sending this to threaten you. We're sending it so you understand. Your empire is rotting from the inside, and we're just speeding it up." Across Thazul Prime, thousands saw it. Workers, soldiers, scientists. The first seeds of doubt planted directly in the capital's heart. In an underground safe house beneath the Western District, a Ginthi engineer watched the broadcast. Twice, then 3 times. He'd lost 2 sons on Veltron 3. The official report said they'd died heroes. But what he saw on that chip was a massacre. The next day, the engineer smuggled blueprints to the human resistance via black market channels, power node schematics, weak points in ship design, command chain weaknesses. He wasn't the only one. The resistance had done more than fight. They'd infected the Empire. Meanwhile, on a stolen Ginthi scout ship drifting near a dead sector, Commander Hayes met with her inner circle. The air was heavy. Tactical reports littered the table. They were planning something big. "Thule Prime is cracking," said Milo, pointing to a map glowing with red pulses. "They've ramped up internal security, double patrols, curfews." That kind of fear only happens when a government knows it's losing control. They're trying to plug holes, Ava muttered, but we've turned their ship into a CI. Hayes stared at the data. The flicker of hope didn't reach her eyes. They haven't hit back yet, she said, which means they're planning something worse than we've seen before. Milo glanced up. Then why strike at Thazul now? Because if we wait, they'll regroup, she said. And if we hit them now, we don't just win the war. Ava looked at her. Then what do we win? Hayes finally looked up. We end the Empire. The Ginthi sky was bleeding, not with rain, but with fire. Streaks of burning wreckage fell from orbit as the Resistance launched their first coordinated strike directly on Thazul Prime. For centuries it had stood untouched, the unshakable heart of the Empire. Now it shook with the roar of explosions, the shrieking of sirens, and the distant thunder of falling towers. Commander Elena Hayes stood aboard a stealth-modified Garinthi destroyer, eyes fixed on the burning planet below. The ship trembled as it pierced through the outer defense shell, cloaked by stolen codes and a suicide-run playbook. Her voice cut through the silence on the bridge. Drop the decoys, full spread, let them think we're everywhere. Ava Lennox nodded from the tactical station. Launch initiated, decoys away, targeting 30 city sectors plus false signals in the upper atmosphere. Good, Hayes muttered. Let the bastards panic. Below, the chaos unfolded exactly as they'd planned. The decoy pods, rigged to mimic heat signatures of incoming dropships, scattered across the surface. Anti-air defences spun wildly, tearing into shadows and ghosts. The real strike team, riding inside this very ship, slipped through the madness unseen. Infiltration began. 10 elite resistance fighters, including Hayes herself, boarded gravlifts and dropped into the heart of the city. Their target, the High Command Citadel, the brain of the Ginthi Empire. As the lift descended, Milo whispered, "You think he'll be there?" Hayes didn't need to ask who. "Yes," she said coldly. Vrake wouldn't run. The gravlift hissed open and they stepped into a war zone. The streets were unrecognizable. Gunfire rattled like thunder. Civilians screamed. Ginthi soldiers fired blindly into smoke, their formations crumbling under the weight of confusion. This wasn't just a military strike. It was psychological decapitation. Every hologram that flickered through the city now showed human faces. Resistance fighters, civilians, survivors. Elena Hayes. Her voice played on a loop, hijacking every public channel. You once said humans were too disorganized to win, that we fought like insects? Then why are your towers falling? They didn't come to occupy, they came to end it. Inside the Citadel, Admiral HFY stood before the last surviving members of the High Command. Smoke drifted in through shattered glass panels. Sirens wailed across every level of the tower. "This is your fault," Fry hissed at him, blood on his lips and fear in his eyes. "You said they were weakened, that they were finished." "I said they were dangerous," VC growled, clutching a pulse rifle, but no one listened. "They'll destroy everything," one of the councillors moaned. "We are the Empire. We are the law of the stars." "No," Grath said grimly. "You were." A blast shook the chamber. Then came a breach warning. The Resistance had entered the upper levels. Vrathk raised his weapon, face stone-like. "Get to the lower vaults if you want to live." The council fled. He stayed, because he knew who was coming. 2 floors below, Hayes and her squad moved like shadows. They encountered pockets of resistance, elite guards who still believed they could hold back the tide. None of them lasted long. Milo was grazed. Ava took a shot to her armor plate but kept moving. Every room closer to the command chamber felt like peeling back the skin of a dying beast. Hayes kicked in the final blast door. There he was, Admiral HFY, alone, unflinching. He turned to face her, weapon held loosely in one hand. "So this is how it ends." It ended the day you tortured our children, she said coldly. This is just the closing act. Wrath looked at her, something like resignation in his eyes. I warned them. I told them what you'd become. Hayes stepped forward, rifle aimed directly at his heart. No, she said. You told them what we were. You never understood what you made us. The room was silent. Smoke drifted in through broken windows. Outside, the Garinthi skyline burned like the pages of a closing book. I won't beg, Brathik said. I don't want you to. And she pulled the trigger. The blast threw him back into the command console, a hiss of energy and light. He crumpled to the floor, the last symbol of the Ginthi military falling without ceremony. For a moment, no one moved. Then Hayes exhaled, deep, shaking. She looked down at the body of the Admiral, not with satisfaction, but with relief. He was the last wall, and now he was dust. Milo stepped beside her. That's it then. We did it. No, she said quietly. We just made it possible. Alva joined them. You think they'll surrender? Hayes stared out at the flames, the chaos, the rubble that had once been the pride of a galaxy-spanning empire. No, she whispered. They'll adapt. If they're smart, or they'll burn. She turned, stepping back into the smoke-filled hallway, with her rifle slung low. Either way, we're not done. 6 months after the fall of Thazul Prime, the galaxy was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a scream, when everyone's catching their breath, eyes wide, hearts pounding, trying to understand what just happened. The Garinthia Empire was not gone, but it wasn't an empire anymore. What remained were splintered fleets, isolated governors, and scared generals holed up in bunkers, pretending they still ruled something. Most of their colonies had either declared independence or opened their gates to resistance envoys, with white flags and hollow smiles. And Earth, for the first time in generations, Earth was more than just a scarred planet trying to survive. It had become a symbol, a warning, a fire in the dark. Commander Eleanor Hayes sat alone on a hillside overlooking what used to be a Ginthi military base, now converted into a human memorial site. Rows upon rows of makeshift stones lined the field, names carved in steel. Some had real stories, some were just guesses. So many had no bodies to bury. The wind rolled through the grass, carrying with it the smell of ash and fresh soil. A strange combination. She ran her fingers along one of the markers. It read, Talia Hayes, age 17. They're taking us apart, piece by piece. Elena exhaled, long, slow. She hadn't cried in months. Couldn't. The tears had dried up somewhere during the 5th planetary assault, or maybe when she'd killed Admiral Varatha with her own hands. She didn't regret it, but she wasn't proud either. That's what no one told you about winning. There's no parade, no music, just the weight. Behind her, the sound of footsteps on gravel. Didn't think you'd still be here, said Ava Lennox, her long-time second-in-command. I thought I'd feel something when it was over, Elena said without turning. Anything. Relief, rage, grief. But it's just empty. Ava sat beside her, arms resting on her knees. That's the thing, isn't it? You fight for so long, you forget how to be anything else. Silence. Then Ava spoke again. Milo's setting up the new Provisional Council. First elections in 2 months. Whole galaxy's watching Earth now. Elena snorted. God help them. You should run, Ava said. You earned it. I'm not a politician. Number. But you're someone they trust. Someone who didn't just burn the Empire down, but held the match steady. Elena shook her head. I didn't fight to lead. I fought so no one else would have to become me. Ava didn't push. She knew better. Word is, she said after a beat, the remaining Ginthi enclaves are trying to form a coalition. They're scared, disorganized, but not stupid. Elena finally turned to look at her. You think they'll come back? Eventually, Ava nodded. Different name, different uniforms, same arrogance. Elena stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. Her body still ached from wounds that hadn't healed right. Scar tissue reminded her with every step. Then we make sure the next generation knows how to finish what we started, she said. This time, without needing to set the galaxy on fire. The two of them walked back toward the transport shuttle in silence, passing more graves, more names. Along the perimeter of the memorial field, children played, human children, Ginthi children, other species once enslaved by the Empire, now walking free. The Resistance hadn't just destroyed a government, they'd rewritten the story. Inside the shuttle, Milo sat at a comms panel, sorting through transmissions from newly liberated systems. He looked up when they entered. Galactic Council wants to make Earth the new central hub for diplomacy, he said, barely hiding his smirk. Guess burning down an empire makes you popular. Elena rolled her eyes. Let them build statues if it makes them feel better. Just keep their ships pointed away from us. He handed her a datapad. There's something else. A message. It came through last night, encrypted, from a former Gorinthi officer. She raised a brow. A trap? Maybe, but the tone's different. He wants to talk. Says he remembers what you said before the final strike. Says maybe it's time to learn instead of conquer. Elena stared at the screen for a long time. Then she handed it back without a word. Not now, later. Right now, the galaxy didn't need a hero. It didn't need a savior. It needed time. Time to remember. Time to rebuild. Time to grow into something better than what came before. As the shuttle rose into the sky, the graves below grew smaller and smaller, until they vanished into the green of the earth. And Elena Hayes, monster, rebel, commander, survivor, closed her eyes for the first time in years. Not because the war was over, but because she finally believed it might not start again tomorrow. And that, for now, was enough. Thanks for tuning in to Sci-Fi Chronicles. I hope you enjoyed today's HFY story. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with fellow enthusiasts. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more exciting tales. Until next time, keep exploring the cosmos of creativity.